In 2010, my wife was pregnant with our second child. It was a pretty typical pregnancy, except till the very end. The baby was turned kind of funny, and despite our best efforts, we couldn't get her to flip over. The baby, not my wife. My wife was more than willing to flip over. There's a lot of information out there, by the way, on how to get a baby to flip over the natural way, and taking a door off the hinges and tilting it up on a cinder block and having your wife lay on it upside down doesn't work. Just thought I'd save you some time with that one. The September morning that we went into the hospital, we had every intention of leaving in a day or so with a perfectly healthy baby because the doctor scheduled a C-section to be on the safe side. Things didn't turn out exactly like we planned. On the morning the baby was born, everything got really serious. There was no, "Congratulations, it's a girl." It was all this medical jargon that I didn't understand. And finally, I got the guts to say, "Will somebody please tell me what's wrong with my baby?" That's when the doctor looked at me and said, "Do you know what Down syndrome is?" And that's when I was first hit in the face with the shovel. I went reeling back, and I landed in this chair that I was really glad was behind me. I started shaking. I couldn't breathe. I felt like something was heavy on my chest. I started sobbing uncontrollably. Of course I knew what Down syndrome was, and it terrified me. But you know what scared me the most? What if I didn't love her as much because of this? It was my job to call everybody on our phone list and give them the news. 5 or 6 people down the list all said the same thing. "I'm so sorry." And then I got this guy. This is my father-in-law, Dan. And Dan said 6 words to me that changed my life. "I can't wait to meet her." Another shovel. Well, sort of. I mean, this one didn't hurt the same way. It knocked something loose in my heart. And I realized that in the room next door, there wasn't a diagnosis waiting for me. It was a baby. A little girl that I loved so much that I thought my heart was going to burst out of my chest. And everything that I knew about Down syndrome came from other people. It came from doctors. It came from the media. It came from Wikipedia, not a place I recommend you go when you get any bad news. None of these stories were my story. I needed to retell my story, and it started with my oldest daughter, Tess. I needed to tell her that her sister was born differently, but instead, I got cake. Got the cake home, and Tess and I sang happy birthday at the top of our lungs to her baby sister who was still in the hospital. We celebrated because we didn't add a diagnosis to the family. We added Isabelle Lucille. Here's the deal. You are going to take a shovel to the face. It is not a matter if, it is when. You lose a job, you get sick, a relationship goes south. You might have a child with a disability. You can't do anything about these things that happen to you, but you can control your story. Now, before you start thinking this is some kind of power of positive thinking, kumbaya stuff, it's not. There's actually research out there that says when people take control of their narrative and they retell their story, that later on they actually report higher levels of well-being. But how you tell your story is important. Now, I've stopped saying that my daughter's birth was like a shovel to the face. Now I think it was like this big, goofy, lovable dog came running towards me, knocked me over, and slobbered me. And that's what was on my chest and why I couldn't move. That's my story, my new narrative. And here's the awesome thing. You get to rewrite your narrative as well. It's yours. It's beautiful, it's sacred, it's personal, and it totally belongs to you. Don't let anybody else write a story onto you. When the whole world was telling me that having a child with a disability was a very bad, awful, horrible thing, I decided to rewrite it. But you know what the hardest part of this whole thing is? All the unlearning you have to do. Everything that I knew about intellectual disabilities was wrong. Lesson number 1 I learned, people with Down syndrome are just that. They're people. Down syndrome is not who or what my daughter is. Isabelle is smart, she's beautiful, she's funny, she's incredibly loving. She's none of the words that sometimes people throw at you when they're talking about intellectual disabilities, which leads me to my next point. If you're going to do this, if you're going to rewrite your narrative, have patience with yourself and with others. Because building a new narrative is a little bit like building a campfire. You don't just take a log and drop it on a match and expect it to go up in flames. You got to build it a twig at a time. And each time you tell your new narrative, your fire gets bigger. And eventually people won't be able to ignore it. Really, it's a choice. I could stand up here and I could tell you about the pain of being hit in the face with a shovel. Or I could tell you about this incredibly powerful love that knocked me over that I never saw coming. I'm picking love over a shovel to the face any day. Thank you.